Hello and welcome to Basildon's Retire Well TV. I'm your host, Paul Gebhardt, with my good friend, Simon Rogers of Basildon Financial. Welcome back, Simon.
Great to be here.
Good to see you, my friend. You're looking good.
Yeah, same with you.
Still playing a little tennis?
I am when I get a chance.
Yeah.
Love it.
I love that. So let's jump into this today. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, as a result of the pandemic, we all know the government came in and put together some bailout funding.
Yeah.
That's really caused the deficit to go crazy.
Oh, yeah. Trillions. Yeah, they spent trillions.
Yeah.
So,
would you explain a little bit about what that looks like for future generations, right? And what are we dealing with here?
Yeah. Well, let's start with like what is a trillion, because I was good in math from like first grade on, but my brain just can't process a trillion.
Sure.
It's kind of like if we drive to Florida from Pennsylvania, it's about 1,000 miles. I got that. But the sun's 93 million miles away. I don't have that. That's just
right.
like, I can't comprehend that.
Can't fathom, right?
Yeah. So I tell you what, let's have the viewers take out a piece of paper, because this will be fun. This will be fun exercise.
Yes.
But it'll be, if you want to look like a genius to your friends, and your coworkers, your family, your spouse, your kids, write this analogy down on a piece of paper, and then you can repeat it to somebody else. And but we'll go through what is exactly $1 trillion. So if you start on the left side of the paper, and I want you to start with a 1, and then we're going to write some zeros, and the next number is going to be longer, but put the next 1 under the last one, and we're going to write zeros. So the number kind of gets, as we go down the page, the number gets longer off to the right. And there's a purpose behind this. Yeah. So if we write down 100,000, it's 1, 2 zeros, comma, 3 zeros. Okay. Then we write down 1,000,000, which is a 1, comma, 3 zeros, comma, 3 zeros. And we all basically kind of probably have a good idea what 1,000,000 is. Even if we don't have 1,000,000, we may have 100,000 in our IRA or 401k, and that's basically 10 times. 1,000,000's 10 times that. So it's not hard to grasp. Yeah. Okay. A lot of us have an understanding of what a billion is, which it's 1,000 million. So instead of having 6 zeros, it's got 9 zeros.
Right.
So if we're looking down on a football field and we see 1,000 piles of cash down there, and each pile was $1 million. Collectively on the field is $1 billion. Okay, so that's a kind of good visual. Wow, a lot of piles. Yeah, and a lot of money.
That puts it in perspective. I like that.
Yeah. Now, if we go to $1 trillion, just like a billion is 1,000 million, $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. So it gets a little, it's like, okay, now we're approaching the sun.
Excuse me, if you fainted, I wish they had smelling salts, but stay with us because we're going to school. Keep going. Wow, that's overwhelming, that number, right? Yeah. So explain that one more time.
Yeah, so it's 9 zeros. Pardon me, $1 trillion is 12 zeros, $1 billion is 9 zeros. Yeah. So if we take out our paper and we write down 1 and then 2 zeros, comma, 3 zeros, that's 100,000. Then a 1 right directly below that 1, a comma, 3 zeros, comma, 3 zeros, that's 1,000,000. Then $1 billion, you want to write to the side, 1 billion, write basically the million, 6 zeros, and add 3 more zeros on the end. And then on the left side, write $1 trillion and copy the billion and add 3 more zeros, and then that's $1 trillion. Okay? So make sure we have that on our paper because we're going to have some fun with this. Yeah.
This is pretty cool. So hopefully you're playing along. This is really good stuff.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's still a hard concept to grasp. Sure. So when we go to, we hear in the news all the trillions that are being spent, and the fiscal budget is so many trillion, and they spent so many trillion, and blah, blah, blah. Let's take reality, and let's take real numbers, let's take fiscal year 2019. Last year was insane with what happened with COVID. But the fiscal budget in 2019, or rather the spending, well, let's go with tax revenue first. 3.4 trillion. Okay, so we're going to put 3, comma 4, 2 zeros, comma, and then we're going to go again. 3 more zeros, 3 more zeros, 3 more zeros.
Yep.
Okay, so that we have that number down on the page. Then right below that, we're going to put 4, comma 4, 2 zeros, comma 3 zeros, 3 zeros, 3 zeros. Okay, so we've got 3.4 billion was the tax revenue they brought in.
Yep.
4.4 billion was what they spent, and then I wanted you to draw a line under that, and then this is simple math. Even though it's trillions, it's the difference is 1, right? So if you subtract, you have 3.4 trillion, and subtract 4.4 trillion, you have 1 trillion difference. And so put a negative because they overspent.
Negative.
Negative 1, comma, and then 12 zeros.
Unbelievable.
So that was fiscal year 2019. So we were $1 trillion in the hole, roughly. I've rounded these numbers. They're not perfectly right on the mark, but just for the sake of the point
So again,
we're
we're
making.
pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic, yep, because all bets were off last year. It got a little crazy last year.
Yeah.
So now here's the genius, and here's exactly, and this is why I wanted you to write this down. This is how we're going to get it into our heads and make it all click and
Yes.
go, okay, now I totally get this.
Yes. This
And
is the relevancy of it all, right?
Right. You have to have written this down.
Yes.
So hopefully at home you've
Yes,
written this
please
down.
play along.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So now we're going to get rid of 8 zeros. So we're going to start at the right-hand side, and you just keep crossing off on the 3.4 trillion and the 4.4 trillion. I want you, and the 1 trillion deficit. And I want you to cross off 8 zeros as you move to your left, and then do it. The next number, 8 zeros, move to the left. 8 zeros, move to your left. Okay. And what we have left is 34,000 minus 44,000 equals 10,000.
Negative 10.
Thank you. Negative 10.
Yeah, I'm staying with you, buddy.
Now the trillions were the federal government. Now, if we take out 8 zeros, that could potentially be a household budget.
Yeah, this is your
right?
budget now. Okay, so pretend it's your budget, right?
Missing the 8 zeros, now it's in a perspective of a number that our brains can process.
Manageable.
Yeah, by just eliminating 8 zeros off every number there.
Yeah.
So now imagine this is you and your household or your neighbor's household or somebody you know, and they brought in 34,000, they spent 44,000, and at the end of the year, they had $10,000 in debt. That is the equivalent of what our federal government did in 2019 alone. So, and now, I'm going to ask you, Paul, if that was your household, let's say, which I know it's not, but if it was your household, and you got to that end of the year, maybe something came up, like you lost a job or medical bills or whatever, something unusual came out and caused this to happen. How would you fix that going into the next year, or would you fix it? Would you just keep rolling and keep amassing 10,000 in debt each year?
This is good stuff, and part of me feels like, oh my gosh, it's like it's your question, but I'm thinking about what you're saying, and immediately I know how it would kind of go in our household. I'd have to tiptoe around the subject, right?
Yeah.
But we'd have to sit down somehow, the wife and I.
Yeah.
We're both in a relatively good mood. So this probably would involve a glass of wine, maybe, right? Or something like that, right? And we sit down and we talk about, hey, how do we get a handle? We'd probably attack the expense side first, right?
Okay.
And say, how can we get a handle on our spending? And then what else can we do to earn more money?
Right.
Do you have to go back to work? And what does that look like?
Yep.
And would we actually have a net there? Because there might be a cost to you going back to work.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my. So you're right. It would be an involved conversation, but I'd have to try to find a way to lower my expenses and increase my income.
Yeah. Those are the only two variables in the whole equation. It's not. It's a pretty simple equation.
Yeah, because I don't have anybody I can raise taxes on and pay for my debt.
Right. Yeah. You can't, but the government can.
Ugh.
So their way out is obviously printing money and then taxing. So taxing us, that's their part-time job or extra job, second job or whatever is raise tax revenues. So we'll get into the next segment. We'll get into how does that kind of impact us a little more. But that's a wonderful explanation. I think it just made sense to me when I first heard it about 15 years ago of what $1 trillion is, because okay, I can wrap my head around 34 grand and 44 grand, but 3.4 trillion, not really.
Yeah.
So
no, I love the math of all. So we have to take a quick break here in a second. Yeah. But I understand you do have an offer for our viewers today.
Yeah.
Would you share that with them?
So yeah. So today's offer is going to be we're proactive tax planning. And I would urge you to call now at 877-441-4901. And the reason, because by the end of the show, I think you're definitely going to want to call. So be quick and call now. We've got 10 appointments open. Grab one of the first 10 appointments. If you get to the end of the show and you feel like, well, that wasn't worth it, you can cancel the appointment. But I think this is going to generate a ton of calls. So I want to be fair, because it's not going to be apparent till the end of the show as to why it's so important to call us. But we will walk you through either a full-fledged income tax, future proactive tax planning plan, or a full-blown written financial plan. Those are no obligation and complimentary on the house. There's no, and people hear that and they always think there's always a catch, right? Well, there's no catch, because we're not sure, we don't know you and you don't know us. And for us to be client advisor, it has to work for both of us. You may have gobs of money and you may be wonderful people, but the services you need may not be in our wheelhouse. And if it's not what we do day in and day out, we don't want to take you on board, because we want to be able to provide the services that we do day in and day out that we feel we're best at to a potential client. So that's why we don't charge. I don't want to be in a position where I've charged you and you need XYZ services and we provide ABC services, and I want to say politely, hey, we're not the right firm for you. But if I've taken your money for this, then I'm going to feel not right about that. Yeah. So that's why it's no cost and no obligation.
You're just a good guy, man. I love that. So it's completely complimentary. So please, I know they won't be canceling this appointment, by the way, because I've gotten to talk to this guy, and let me tell you, he's super sharp. So call him, 877-441-4901. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back after these messages. Stay with us.
Both my parents started off as university professors in England, so I think teaching's in my blood. What we do is very complicated, but we lay it out in a way that is very easy to understand.
It's just a matter of being able to convey the information that they need most to make the best decision for them.
Don't have to do what we do for a living to take a look at our plan and within a couple minutes totally grasp it. When you're teaching, you're really helping somebody learn. So I have a genuine love and desire and kind of a need really to help people. I think that comes from my heart. In England, you name your house like we name our dog. Every house has a name. And the house that my father was born at is my grandmother's house, and the name of her house was Basildon. Whenever I was over there, I felt safe, and I felt loved, and I felt taken care of, and I felt everything was okay. I strive to have our clients feel that same way.
Should something devastating happen, the last thing that they need to think about is, am I covered? Am I secure? How is this going to affect me financially? I think they need to focus on being well and spending time with the ones that they love.
They feel secure in that they can depend on us to do what we say we're going to do to help them make the decisions that they need to make.
Welcome back to Basildon's Retire Well TV. I'm your host, Paul Gebhard, with my good friend here, Simon Rogers. Simon, listen, okay, we left off in a spot, so I'm just going to say go. Pick up where you left off.
Okay, great. So we were talking about fiscal year 2019 of the federal budget, and we brought in $4 trillion, and we spent $4.4 trillion, and we're in the hole $1 trillion. And we've been doing that, we all know, for years, but I even get numb to these numbers. We also know, many of us, that there's back, a couple of years ago, that the federal debt was about $21 trillion.
Yeah.
So if we do the same, write it down and take off the 8 zeros, that becomes $210,000. And let's pretend it's the same household we're talking about, okay? They made 34 grand last year, they spent 44, they finished the year 10 grand in the hole. They had debt, our federal debt, 21 trillion. That equals, if you take the 8 zeros away in that household, that equals $210,000 of debt in that household.
Yep.
Now they just added 10 more, so they're at 220.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Then we have something else, which is 44 trillion, according to a couple of years ago, the Congressional Budget website claimed that we had unfunded liabilities of the federal government of 44 trillion. And you're going to be puzzled.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, so unfunded liabilities, let's unpack that a little bit. A liability is something you're liable for, right? So they owe this money. Unfunded means they haven't set the money aside for it. Okay, so these are things like Social Security, which we kind of now, Bell's probably light bulb going off. Okay, I knew Social Security was in trouble. That goes into the category of unfunded liabilities. It's what the government's on the hook for that they haven't set the money aside for to pay for. They have to pay it down the road, and they don't have the money saved up for it. So it's Social Security, it's federal pensions, including military, it's Medicare prescription drugs, and Medicaid is the bulk of it, but there's some other smaller things in there. And a lot of those numbers are going up as we see retirees coming on and getting onto Social Security and claiming Social Security and getting on Medicare. Those numbers are starting to come due. Those payments of the federal government are starting to come due. So the Congressional Budget website or office said a couple of years ago that they estimate that number, and it's a hard number to estimate, to be 44 trillion. So that, if we write that down on the paper and we take 8 zeros away, that's 440,000 plus the debt of 21 trillion, which is 210,000. That's $650,000 of debt in that household.
Yes.
Now, this is the federal government, but we're just taking the federal government's numbers, and we're taking 8 zeros off all these numbers and pretending that's a household.
Like it's your household, ladies and gentlemen, like it's your household. That's what we're getting at.
So what we get with those numbers, these are real numbers from the federal government, is that we brought in 34 grand in fiscal year 2019. We spent 44. We added 10,000 to the debt. We already had $650,000 in debt. A household that has 650 grand in debt that brings in 34,000 and is spending 44.
Oh my gosh.
So, there's in the last segment we were talking about how do we fix this? There's only 2 variables. There's income and there's expenses.
Right. And
you've got to basically jack the income as high as you can and drop the expenses as low as you can. And then it's going to take decades to pull out of this. So the next segment we want to get into is the tax history, and I think it's probably about break time. And
we're going to take a quick break. We're going to do that.
We'll go to tax
because I know that's some really good stuff. So we're going to bring this all home here in the next segment, which is really powerful. I want you to stay tuned and listen to what he has to say. Meanwhile, he's got a complimentary offering to come meet with him. This is normally $1,000, $1,500 in some firms. He's willing to meet with you today. Call him. I think you're going to have the time of your life. And bottom line, be in control of your future. You're going to be driving the bus, not your government, right? Call 877-441-4901 and talk with Simon and his team. We're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back after these messages. Stay with us.
How do I handle my taxes? How do I do my estate planning? I mean, there's just a myriad of questions and issues that they have that they just have never done before. It's not always what we don't know, but it's what we don't know that we don't know.
I think that there's a lot of unknown out there. There's a lot of misinformation, and I've seen the effects that that's had.
A lot of our clients, our niche is helping people transition into retirement. They're retiring and they have a nest egg that they've been saving. They want to have somebody who knows the answers to the questions they have and help them through the decision-making process.
I believe that having all of the information in front of you in a way that you understand best is the best way that somebody's able to make a decision appropriate for what they need.
And no two plans are the same because no two clients are the same. My goal is they can kind of get up every day and year after year and see that the plan is working and that they don't have anything to worry about so that they can put their focus on what's really important. You know, money's great, and we all need it to pay our bills, but to me, it's what the money's going to do for you. You're going to remember your trips. You're going to remember your great experiences with your loved ones. I mean, it's just waking up every day and it's Saturday morning. They work so hard for so long to retire. You earn everything. It makes it all worthwhile.
Hello again, and welcome back to Basildon's Retire Well TV. I'm your host, Paul Gebhardt, with our good friend Simon Rogers, who's taking us to school today, which I am very much appreciative. And I'm all ears, buddy. So this relates to the third segment's about the tax history. Open that up for us.
Yeah. So this is a little bit kind of what it's like in our office. We like to educate our clients and we like to help them out. So if the income tax started in 2013 at 7%. And by 5 years later, 2018, it was 77%. In 1945, we hit the highest marginal tax bracket this country has ever seen, 94%.
94%.
Yeah. When I first heard that, I didn't believe it. I'm like, that's not true. And I went to the IRS's site, and I'm like, oh, my God, 94%.
God, that would have made it really hard to be motivated to go to work.
Oh, yeah. Well, in fact, there's a story about Reagan. And when Reagan came into office, if we remember, he cut taxes.
Yeah.
It was personal for him.
Really?
He was out in California. And back then in 1945, if you were a married couple, which he was, making $200,000 or more, which was a lot back then, you were paying 94% on anything above $200,000.
What?
That was Ronald Reagan. He was getting paid $100,000 per movie. And so if he made 2 movies, he was just under that bracket. But the third movie put that extra $100,000 into that 94% bracket. And then California took the other 6. So if he made 2 movies or 3, he netted the same. So he literally told the studios, I'm only making 2 movies a year. I'm not making 3 because I don't get paid for the third one.
Right, I'm working for free.
Yep.
Makes no sense.
Yep. So when he got into office, that's why he cut taxes, because it was kind of personal for him.
That's good.
So
I didn't know that. That's a great story.
It's a cool story, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good story.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stories like that. So from 1936 to 1980, our top marginal tax rate never dropped below 70%. Right now, our taxes the top marginal rate is about half that. So you can, now we've never had as much debt and as much deficit than we've had now. So, nobody can predict, including myself, what's going to happen in the future. But if I were to bet where it's going, taxes have to go up. As we talked in the last segment, the debt and the unfunded liabilities are so extreme, we can't accomplish that by merely cutting expenses. Right. We're going to have to raise revenue. And for the government, that's not, for us, it's an extra part-time job. Yeah. But for the government, it means jacking our tax rates up.
Yeah, because that's the resource they have.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So let me bring this home for the viewers. If you are a married couple and you're at home and you're bringing in $70,000, and let's say you're retired, $30,000 of that is Social Security and $40,000 of that is, say, IRA withdrawals or a combination of that and a pension. Your tax liability in that case is $3,000. If we can do some proactive tax planning, which we've been doing for our firm and our clients for about 15 years now, I'll give you one example of those many examples of proactive tax planning. We've been doing Roth conversions for about 15 years now. And you can just do a bit of that, not a whole lot. But you take the same 30,000 and same gross of 70,000, but instead you've done some planning. You've been working with a firm like ours for a number of years, and now your 30,000 of Social Security is the same, but instead of 40,000 of IRA withdrawals, you have 30,000 and $10,000 of Roth withdrawals. So you got the same $70,000 gross. You take your taxable liability from 3,000 down to 1. Now, if you have the same scenario and you take 20,000 from a traditional IRA and 20,000 from a Roth, you still have all the same 70,000. Now you have paid nothing in taxes. So if we look at these tax rates where they were 70% in our lifetime, and we realize the taxes now are about half that, and we see how bad the government's in debt, and we think that the government's going to raise taxes, which we're believers in that.
Yeah,
and
seem
I
inevitable.
think,
Yep.
yeah, it's almost a foregone conclusion. If that bothers you, call us. This is why I said in the beginning of the segment, you're going to want to call before until you see this, so we can help you with that. We can show and sit down with you and show you how to do this. It's going to be much like this session today, this show today, a lot of education, a lot of explaining so that you can comprehend how this is done and it makes sense to you. Because I don't want anybody to move forward with anything with us until they go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. That makes sense. I understand why I would want to do that.
Yeah. What an incredible service. I mean, this is just something I think everybody should definitely pick up that phone and call right now. I mean, this is something that you get to take control of because it is your future.
Yeah.
Right.
And if we go back to that example, and that person paying $3,000 and tax rates double, guess what? Now you're paying $6,000.
Right.
But if we can work with you and bring it down to $1,000, maybe it only doubles to $2,000.
Yeah.
But if we can work with you and get down to 0, then we don't care if the tax rates double.
Yeah, absolutely.
Two times 0 is still 0.
Right. Wow. So again, one more time for the viewers, because I know we're coming to the end of the show here. You got some slots still available, complimentary.
Yep.
If they reach out and call you, when you share with them.
Yeah, complimentary. We'll sit down with you, find out what's going on in your financial house. And even if you're working with a current financial advisor, particularly if they've never asked you your tax return, then good chance that none of this kind of tax planning has ever been done. And we'll show you what we do for our clients. And again, it's not a commitment to become a client. We'll have to figure that out down the road if it comes to that. But this is to show you what we're talking about, how we can fix this and possibly impending problem for you and how we would solve it for you.
Good stuff. Hey, listen, I hope you learned as much as I did today. And I just got to say, who am I? I'm just an everyday guy. I'm an average Joe. People like Simon are invaluable. I mean, I rely on them, and I appreciate what you've done today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
But I guess the question is really up to you. What do you want your tomorrow to look like? Take control today. Give Simon a call, 877-441-4901. Thank you for being with us. Have a wonderful day.